Hi, it's Maya here, and today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in April. I actually finished the first book of April during the last 2 weeks of April. During the first half, I mainly read comics, but I'm going to talk about the books that I finished in April first. And the first book that I finished in April was The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. I read this for the Spring into Horror readathon, even though this isn't horror. It's a science fiction modern classic with some creepy bits. This tells about the village of Midwich where nothing really happens except for one day when no one can get into the village because everyone falls asleep when they get into this certain area around the perimeter, and it seems that everyone in the village is asleep as well. And from aerial images, the military can see that there is a weird object that has landed in the middle of the village. So one whole day is missed like this, and the following morning everyone wakes up and people can get into the village again, and the weird object has disappeared. Everything seems to return to normal until people realize that every woman of childbearing age is now pregnant. I was actually surprised by how much I like this book. It was a really good reading experience. The writing style just really worked for me. This book is divided into 2 parts, and I read the first part in one sitting. I liked how the story focused on the whole village of Midwich, and I liked also the questions of morality and ethics and civilization that it raised. And I completely understand why this is considered a modern classic, especially in the field of science fiction. It was just a really captivating read. Now, this book was written in the 50s, and some characters, often men, made some stupid statements or wide generalizations about women, but thankfully there was also often a woman character around who sort of could give them the side eye and say something in return. But not every time, so sometimes these statements went uncommented, and even a few times a woman said something that I didn't agree with. But anyway, it was written in the 50s, and one thing that I also found a bit weird about this was that the focus of the story was on the male characters. Even though in this scenario the women were the ones who were affected the most, all the main characters were men, or the focus characters. There were a few female characters, but they weren't focused on as much as the men. The narrator is sort of this everyman character. There's also this wise old man who is philosophical but a bit batty. And then there's also the government or military man who likes to keep track of what's happened in the city. And there's a vicar and a doctor and so on. So that was a bit of a weird choice. But what you gonna do? I still really enjoyed this, and I will definitely read more from John Wyndham. And I did actually contemplate giving this 5 stars on Goodreads, so it's sort of a 4.5 stars rating. And if you have any suggestions, or if you have a favorite John Wyndham story, please recommend it to me in the comments. I'm especially interested in reading The Day of the Triffids and The Chrysalids. I'm just going to quickly mention that I did start reading Hangs a Man by Shirley Jackson during the Spring into Horror readathon, but I read only about 50 pages, and then I decided that I wasn't really in the mood for Shirley Jackson's writing at that point. I really do enjoy and like her writing style in general, but now the long sentences didn't work for me at that moment. And like I said in my TBR, I didn't know anything about this book going in, and turns out there's sexual assault in this book, and I sort of wasn't prepared for that, and I put it aside. I will definitely continue reading The Hangs a Man at some point, but the next book that I actually finished was The Martian by Andy Weir. This is a book that I started all the way back in March, so it took me about a month to read it, but 2 weeks of that was because I was on vacation and I didn't bring it with me, so it was just lying there for 2 weeks. And I'm rating this something like a 4-. I found this to be a lot of fun and it was entertaining, but I didn't like it as much as the books that I usually give 4 stars to. So it's a 4-. And as you all probably know, this is about the astronaut Mark Watney who gets stranded on Mars, and it's about how he survives on Mars, and also there are characters on Earth who are trying to find a way to rescue him and bring him back to Earth. The one thing that surprised me with this was that despite a lot of techno-babble or science babble in general and going into details, I really liked this and found it entertaining. Mark had to survive on Mars, so he had to come up with ways to get more water, to get more food, and the sort of chemical reactions that he needed to achieve all of this were described in a lot of detail, but it didn't bother me, and many times I even found it interesting, and that's a bit of a shock for me. The book and the protagonist were often funny, but I found that when Mark was actually trying to make a joke and be funny, I found him really irritating. His jokes would sort of revolve around screaming like a girl or boobs or something like that, But otherwise, this was often fun. Even though I was reading this so slowly and put it down for a while, it didn't seem to take away from the reading experience. Perhaps it helped that this is written as Mark's diary, so there are entries and often there is a bit of time between the entries. So that might have helped with being able to follow it easily, even though I had a bit of a break. Next, I finished a novella, The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps by Kai Ashante Wilson. And this is sort of science fantasy mix in that there are science fictional elements in the world, but the story itself is more of a fantasy story. This is about a group of guards who follow this merchant caravan and have to keep it safe through the desert and also this dangerous bit of land called the Wildeeps. The main character is called Demain, and he is a demigod, which means that he is more powerful than the regular guys in the guard due to his heritage. He's also from a different part of the continent, and his native language is different than what the other guards are speaking. So the fact that he's a doctor, but he doesn't have the medical terms in the other people's language, makes him sound like he's doing magic, and that's why they call him the sorcerer. So the main story's focus is both the journey of the caravan through the Wildeeps and also the main character's relationship with the captain of the guards. He's also a demigod, but from a different place in the continent, so he has different powers, and Demain is in love with him. I really enjoyed this. I read about 30% of it first, and then I decided to start again from the beginning, because I had been reading this in bits and pieces right before falling asleep, and that is not the optimal way of reading this. And I'm glad that I decided to start again. I actually started reading this from the beginning during Cozy Reading Night, which was hosted by Lauren and the Books. And it is a 3-hour-long readathon of just cozy reading. And I spent one of those hours starting this from the beginning. And I'm so glad I did, because I had missed so much. So much had passed me by. I had forgotten a lot when I had fallen asleep. Like, I think it was the second chapter, which actually happened before the first chapter, and I had completely missed that on my first read through. So I'm glad I started it again. And I think I got to the same point where I had been on the next day after the Cozy Reading Night, so it didn't take me that long. So my advice to you would be to read this in larger chunks and not try to read it right before you're falling asleep. I ended up really enjoying this, and I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed Demain as a character and learning more about this science fancy world. I'm really looking forward to reading the second novella set in this universe. I have it on hold from the library. And then a bit of a random book that I read in April was Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers. And reading Mary Poppins actually stopped April from becoming a total dude fest. I just realized that all of the other books and comics that I had read in April were by men, and usually I read more women. I read about 60% women or even a bit more in a year than men. So this was a bit of a surprise month for me. But anyway, Mary Poppins, a kid's book. I've seen the movie many times and I wanted to compare the book and the movie. And they were similar yet different. I know that doesn't tell you much, but the character of Mary Poppins is really, really fun and quite similar to the book, but cranked up a bit. So she is quite vain and full of herself, and I really, really liked her. I know she is like that in the movie as well, but a bit more in the book. And the main way this differed from the movie was that the book was made of these episodes of quirky or magical adventures that Mary Poppins took the kids on. If you don't know, Mary Poppins is a nanny, and one day she turns up to the Banks family and sort of hires herself immediately as their nanny and goes on these little adventures with the kids. The main plot that is in the movie about the father being estranged from his kids and caring more about his job and money than the kids isn't in this book. This is just the episodical adventures, these weird and fantastical moments that happen when the kids are with Mary Poppins. I found this fun. The writing style was this nice children's book, a rhythm, and I did enjoy the character of Mary Poppins. I gave this one 3 stars. So now I'm going to briefly mention the comics that I read in April. The first of those was Yotsuba, volume 13 by Kiyohiko Azuma, and this is a manga about this young kid, I think she's about 5, and her life with her dad and her friends and her dad's friends, and it's just these little things that happen in everyday life, but it's so much fun. Yotsuba is hilarious and I just really enjoy these. These always make me smile. I always give these at least 4 stars. Think I have given 1 5 stars. I always think about giving these 5 stars, but I end up with 4. So in this one, Yotsuba's granny comes to visit, and it's just little daily adventures with her granny and her dad. And then finally I read 4 volumes of Akira by Katsuhiro Otomo, and I read the volumes 6 to 9. This is the final volume, volume 12, that I finished today. This is sort of post-apocalyptic science fiction manga where the main characters are from this motorcycle gang, and there are also these little kids with psychic powers. And I think I'm going to talk more about this in my May wrap-up or in a separate video, since I would have to talk about this whole series in one chunk, and I don't feel like doing it right now. In the end, I would give the whole series about 3.5 stars. Some volumes I gave 4 stars, some 3 stars. There were ideas that I really enjoyed and there were sections that I really enjoyed, but the main characters are so annoying. I can't understand how the other characters can deal with them, but I think I'll talk more about this later. So I'm currently almost finished with The Hanging Tree by Ben Aronovich. This is a Peter Grant novel, I forget the number, but the latest one. And I think I have about 1/3 of this left, so this is what I will be finishing this week. I also started reading Wilding Hall by Elizabeth Hand on my Kindle. This is something that I had planned to start during the Spring into Horror readathon, but I hadn't, so I started it now. It's a really short, about novella length horror book. So that was my April wrap-up. Let me know if you have any John Wyndham books to recommend, and also tell me what was your favorite books that you read in April. And that's all from me for now. I will see you in my next video. Bye!